Hey guys, LevelCap here, and today we're taking a look at the top 10 greatest successes in gaming. These 10 games redefined gaming as we know it, made tons of money, and have legacies that may never die. This list is my opinion of the greatest successes and doesn't represent what just made the most money, but it's also games that succeeded by inventing, taking risks, or forever changing how we play and see games. Starting off the list at the bottom, number 10 is Halo. Anyone who was a gamer at the turn of the century will remember the insane buzz that Halo generated even before it launched. Developed by Bungie, a studio that hadn't made an FPS in quite some time, and was mostly known for their Myth real-time strategy games. Halo, in a sense, came out of nowhere. Announced by none other than Steve Jobs himself at Macworld in 1999, the game had a dramatic pre-production phase as it was originally slated to be a Macintosh exclusive with tons and tons of hype. But then, out of the blue, Microsoft bought the game, canceled the plans to release it on Mac OS, and had it developed exclusively for their upcoming console, the Xbox. But this certainly didn't kill the hype for the game, it only shifted it over to a different platform, and it was hard to imagine that the game could even live up to the amount of hype. And to be honest, the original concept was far more ambitious than what we finally saw in 2001, but that didn't matter because the game overall was amazing in pretty much every regard. Effectively launching the Xbox platform and making it an overnight competitor to Sony and Nintendo that had previously dominated the console scene. And despite only launching in November, the Xbox sold 1.5 million units by the end of the year. Likewise, Halo sold 1 million copies by April 2002. Over 50% of every Xbox owner also bought Halo for 2 months straight following its launch. More than that though, Halo really refined the controller scheme that pretty much every modern FPS title uses now. The game made up for lack of precision with analog sticks by giving you large, relatively predictable enemies. Those design principles were translated into multiplayer as well. Players weren't particularly fast or agile, making them much easier to track as targets. Shields gave players ample time to assess the direction of incoming fire and retaliate, while simple melee combat and grenades could be used to quickly drop those shields in close quarter situations that the analog sticks typically made challenging. This control scheme and the gameplay it was designed around was a breath of fresh air for the FPS console genre. Most games at the time felt clunky at best with the controller by comparison. In 2002, Microsoft launched the Xbox Live online multiplayer service. Online support for consoles was still a very new technology at the time, with Sega's Dreamcast being the first console to really offer it. Halo perfectly embodied the spirit of online gameplay, and it showed mainstream console gamers why online play was so amazing. Before Halo and the Xbox, online gaming was pretty much reserved for the PC players, with expensive computers and titles like Quake and Unreal that would translate very poorly to a console experience. Halo was also the perfect storm to kickstart the console competitive gaming scene. It succeeded in not just bringing FPS multiplayer gaming to mainstream console audiences, it also popularized console gaming as a competitive platform. MLG's first console tournament took place in 2003 and featured Halo. While the $10,000 prize pool might be meager by today's standard, Halo esports scene snowballed. Its 2016 World Championship event had a $2.5 million prize pool. Moving on to our number 9 pick, we have a game that made the world take competitive gaming seriously. And no, I'm not talking about StarCraft, I mean the entire world. Counter-Strike was originally a Half-Life 1 mod that Valve bought around 1999. While online gaming was already pretty widespread on PC, the competitive community for existing titles was still very niche. There was certainly a lot of hype and money being thrown at titles of the time, but none of them resonated with the mainstream gamers as much as Counter-Strike. A game of simplicity, elegance, and a huge skill ceiling. After it was released in 2000, Counter-Strike quickly became one of Valve's most successful games. By 2003, it had sold 1.5 million copies. Then, in 2004, the Esports Entertainment Association League, or ESEA, launched the first competitive esports league with Counter-Strike. Together, ESEA and Counter-Strike essentially kickstarted the modern era of esports. Over the years, subsequent Counter-Strike releases would rise and fall in popularity, both with players and viewers, And while it was always an omnipresent franchise in esports, it wasn't until 2012's Counter-Strike Global Offensive that it became one of the dominant staples in competitive gaming. Since 2012, CSGO took esports into the mainstream with the TBS E-League televised events, pioneered trading and gambling for in-game items, and is now commanding multiple million-dollar tournament pools per year. Like with Halo and the original Xbox, it's tough to say where we'd be without Counter-Strike. It's one of those games that few people can remember a time before they existed. Sure, other titles may have taken its place had it not existed, but without Counter-Strike, it's likely the prevalence of online FPS competitive titles would look very different today. One game that doesn't get a lot of credit for its success is number 8 on the list, GARRY'S mod. This is a sandbox game that gives players around the world tools to invent new games, create machinimas, and find all kinds of fun things to do. It really capitalized on the idea of emergent gameplay. Rather than telling you how to play the game, it just gave you tools and let you loose in a sandbox environment. It was originally launched as a mod for Valve's Source engine in 2004. Valve then offered to publish it as a standalone title in 2006. Since then, it's racked up over 15 million units sold. At this point, the game is selling roughly 1.5 million copies a year. And considering that the game was initially developed by one person, Gary NEWMAN, it's pretty impressive to consider how many copies he's sold and how much money he's made. Not to mention, people started making mods for GARRY'S mod, like Trouble in Terrorist Town, Prop Hunt, Jailbreak, Zombie Survival, all of which has built its own culture around extremely popular YouTube videos and entertainment content. To think that all of this started with one guy's vision, modding a game that then got modded even further, it's kind of an amazing story. Now, the simulation RPG genre has a long history of big franchises, but it's pretty rare to see a breakout title, especially on the first go-around. Stardew Valley is the 7th game on the list. It's a sim RPG that serves as something of a spiritual successor to the Harvest Moon franchise. Since its release in 2016, it's gone on to sell over 10 million copies and has been released on every major platform under the sun. The crazy part is it was all made by one developer, BARONE. And unlike a lot of games on this list, Stardew Valley probably isn't revolutionizing the face of gaming or creating totally new genres. But it's incredible to think that one person created such a wildly successful title, especially considering it's actually a pretty deep and complicated game. Barone did everything: the programming, the art, and even the music. Since Stardew's launch, it's gotten multiplayer, been ported to mobile devices, consoles, and even Tesla cars. It continues to get updates and DLC, though the team behind it has likely been expanded to at least more than one person. In total, Barone spent 4 years making Stardew Valley. Not bad for a game that has now made well over $30 million. Its mobile port alone made $1 million in the first 3 weeks on Apple's store. Now, the 6th story on this list isn't necessarily the first success story of mobile gaming, but it's definitely one of the biggest. Angry Birds was one of the first major mobile games to take the world by storm. It combined gameplay simple enough that children could understand it with a bottomless well of levels and challenges. Following its launch in 2009, it spent a consecutive 275 days as the #1 paid app on the Apple Store. The original game alone has at least 50 million downloads. Not only did Angry Birds spawn multiple expansions and a full sequel, but it also had several spin-off games, launched a media empire with books, TV shows, movies, and merchandise found on store shelves all over the world. In all, the game has well over 2 billion total downloads. Angry Birds was one of the first games to realize the potential of mobile gaming as a do-anywhere experience that was approachable to everyone. It wasn't just popular with gamers, your parents, their parents, and their friends were also sinking hours of their day into it. There was a point in time where just about everyone you knew seemed to play it or had at least played it a few times. Now that mobile gaming represents the vast majority of the gaming industry, it's clear that Angry Birds was just the turning point. Its impact can be seen throughout the industry, with titles adopting similar control schemes, mechanics, and even art styles. Now we have games like Pokemon Go and Raid Shadow Legends that dominate the mobile gaming landscape and are generally played by just tapping the screen to perform simple actions over and over. And as much of a meme as Angry Birds has become, it still does represent a decent mobile gaming platform compared to some of the current offerings out there. It also opened the world's eyes to what mobile gaming was capable of in terms of success. When most people think about MOBAs, massive online battle arenas, they probably think about League of Legends. But before MOBAs were even a thing, there was a mod for Warcraft 3 called Defense of the Ancients. At number 5 on our list, Dota not only invented a new genre of gaming, but that genre became the most popular esport ever. Kyle Summer created Dota in 2003 as a mod for Warcraft 3 using the game's world editor. After an update for Warcraft 3, several different people began compiling Kyle's work into new expanded mods. In 2004, development switched hands yet again until it ended up in the hands of ICEFROG, an unknown individual who took over development of the original mod and later Dota 2. And Dota was very successful despite just being a mod. It's tough to nail down an accurate player count due to being custom content for an existing game, but Dota's online presence and forums on Battle.net websites was massive. At one point it had over 100,000 total topics. Compare that to the few thousand topics created for Warcraft 3 and it's clear that a lot of people were talking about Dota. But Dota really didn't reach its full potential until Valve hired IceFrog to create a standalone version of the game where it really exploded onto the scene. Dota 2's beta quickly rose to prominence as a premier esports title, becoming the second highest paying esport franchise behind StarCraft 2, which was breaking records at the time both for viewership and prize pools. By 2017, Dota was outpaying esports players by nearly $60 million versus other competing esports titles. Now, of course, it's hard to talk about Dota without at least mentioning League of Legends because the comparisons there are obvious, but also interesting. This is mainly due to the fact that one of the developers who made League of Legends was also one who worked on the original Dota. In a lot of ways, League of Legends is as much a clone as Dota as it is the same people working on two versions of the same idea. There's plenty to say about copycats and stolen ideas between the two games, but Dota defined the MOBA genre. It's the template nearly every other MOBA is built upon. And both Dota and League of Legends each have maintained well over 1 million average players per month and continue to be massively popular. Number 4 on this list has the name almost as weird as Garry's mod, PLAYERUNKOWN'S Battlegrounds. This should come as no surprise as it was largely pioneered by a single individual who had been trying to perfect his battle royale formula for years. Brendan Greene, who you may not be able to argue that he invented the battle royale, but he certainly popularized it and brought it into the world of gaming in a way that nobody had before him. While his battle royale mods for Arma 2 and DayZ were very popular, it wasn't until he left development of H1Z1 that his vision for battle royale games really clicked with the mainstream audiences. PUBG launched as a Steam Early Access title in March of 2017. It immediately skyrocketed to the top of Steam's player charts, with hundreds of thousands of players logging in daily to check it out. And it was a major upset for both Dota 2 and CSGO, as they were previously the most popular games on Steam, until PUBG came along. Following its retail launch in December of 2017, it's since had multiple mobile ports, a dedicated Chinese version, debuted on both Xbox One and PlayStation 4, as well as a free-to-play version called PUBG Lite. Every platform PUBG appeared on saw it instantly rise to the top. On mobile, it surprisingly dominated, earning millions of dollars in just days. On console, it was one of the most played early access titles ever, and to this day, it commands a healthy concurrent player base, beating even AAA juggernaut titles like GTA 5 Online, Destiny 2, and Rainbow Six Siege. Now, how can you possibly top that? Well, coming in at number 3 is arguably the most important FPS game ever made. Doom launched in 1993 as an episodic shareware title. And for you younglings out there, shareware is a game that physically had to be shared with other people, usually through giving somebody a floppy disk with the game on it. And while PUBG and Angry Birds might have pioneered their respective platforms and genres, Doom popularized the FPS game. Before Doom, there was of course Wolfenstein, but Doom took that rough FPS concept and refined it into something that essentially inspired every single FPS game to come after it. id Software launched Doom as a self-published shareware title. The game's original development team was mostly a ragtag group of people that formed id while working for another developer. Despite their humble start, Doom's developers are some of the most recognized in gaming. John Carmack is considered to be one of the best programmers of all time. His work was instrumental in creating the id Tech engine that Doom ran on. Over the years, his contributions to gaming have resulted in massive technological leaps for 3D graphics, as well as VR hardware. Likewise, John Romero was instrumental in Doom's success. He designed most of Doom's first episode as well as the game's level editor. Doom's community content is possible in large part due to Romero's work. That content is one of the reasons the game's legacy has survived so long. And it wasn't just popular to make community content for Doom back then, it's still getting new community maps, remakes, and more to this day. Romero himself made a 5th episode for the game's 25th anniversary called Sigil. Now, one of the more impressive things about Doom is that it gained an insane amount of popularity with basically no marketing for the game, and in an era before internet was widely available to most people. In fact, one of the few ways people could download files in the early era of the internet was through University Network Systems, their FTP servers. The game was made available for download on the University of Wisconsin's Parkside FTP network, and within hours of becoming available, it had crashed the entire university's network, as over 10,000 people tried to download the game almost instantaneously. And even at 2.5 megabytes for the entire game file, that was still an extremely long download for people on dial-up connections. By 1995, Doom had been installed on more computers than Microsoft's latest operating system, Windows 95. To this day, Doom's influence is readily apparent, even in modern titles. It spawned the FPS genre as we know it, inspiring countless clones and developers around the world. The number 2 game on this list is a bittersweet success story. Tetris was the first game ever to be exported from Russia to America. It was created by a Soviet software engineer named ALEXEY PITNOV. He came up with Tetris while writing simple games to test artificial intelligence hardware. Despite being primarily a test program, it proved to be very popular with Alexey's coworkers at the Soviet Academy of Sciences. They had been working together to create a pack of a dozen or so games to sell as its own system. That pack of games failed to sell well, but Tetris spread throughout Moscow in 1984 as freeware. Eventually, Alexey sold the rights to Tetris to a Hungarian company. Its popularity in Hungary got the attention of the British software company Andromeda. They managed to secure copyright licensing for the game's IBM PC version, as well as on other home computer systems. While Andromeda might have held the license to sell the game on specific platforms, they didn't own the rights to the game itself. Unfortunately, Alexey gave the rights to the Soviet government because he feared what they would do if he sold it to a publisher that wasn't state-sponsored. They held the copyright for 10 years. In that time, Tetris essentially became a worldwide phenomenon. It was available on home computer systems and arcades throughout the world. Alexey regained the rights to the game in 1996 and formed the Tetris company to manage it. Until this point, he had made almost nothing from the sales of the game. Had he retained the rights, he would have definitely been a multi-millionaire several times over. That said, he's probably doing just fine now. In the Tetris company's hands, the game has been ported to pretty much every device capable of displaying images, including iPods of all things. And even fans of the game have been able to port it to such devices as graphing calculators. The game has been modified, changed, adapted to many different formats. Recently, the breakout success of Nintendo's Tetris 99, which is a battle royale variant of the game, prompted the Tetris company to develop a similar title for mobile devices. Tetris Royale is currently in development and available on Android App Store as a beta product. In total, Tetris is one of the best-selling games of all time. At 170 million units sold, it's second only to one other title. That game is number 1 on the list, and you might have already guessed what it is. Minecraft has eclipsed every paid game ever released, with over 180 million units sold. That's more than Tetris, Grand Theft Auto 5, and dozens of other legendary titles. But what puts it in the top spot for me isn't just its utter dominance of the sales charts, it's that it was made by barely more than a handful of people and was sold to Microsoft for $2.5 billion within a few years of its release. To put that in perspective, George Lucas sold the entire Star Wars franchise for $4 billion around the same time. And that's been one of the biggest franchises since the 1970s. Minecraft was created by Marcus Persson, aka Notch, and released as an alpha title in 2009. It was wildly successful within months, and in 2010 the game's currently design, Jen Bergenston, aka Jeb, was brought on to help Notch. The game's beta pulled in over 1 million sales less than a month after it launched in 2011. That's on top of the 800,000 sales accumulated by the alpha build. What makes that even more impressive is that Minecraft had no publisher. It wasn't on Steam and had never been commercially advertised until well after the beta's launch. Its popularity spread directly as word of mouth between players. By the end of 2011, the game had 16 million registered users. By 2014, it had sold 17 million copies on PC, making it that platform's most sold game ever. It's been ported to every console and mobile device you can imagine, and eclipsed Tetris as the highest selling game last year. It's hard to describe Minecraft's impact on gaming, not just because it extends well beyond the scope of gaming, but because so many of today's popular titles were directly inspired by Minecraft. It popularized the survival genre, leading to countless games on every platform imaginable. It revolutionized the concept of in-game crafting, creation, and collaboration. People haven't just built cool-looking houses in Minecraft, they've created scale replicas of entire planets and made functioning computers in the game. Despite Minecraft's seemingly simplistic nature, it's arguably one of the most in-depth and complex games ever made. There's genuinely no bounds to what players can accomplish in Minecraft. It has limitless potential for creativity, all while still being an accessible game that's fun to play regardless of whether or not you just want to make cool buildings, hang out with friends, or recreate famous architecture from around the world. And that wraps it up for my list of the top 10 greatest successes in gaming. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you at least learned something from it. Let me know what you think of my top 10 picks. Are yours different from mine? I look forward to reading the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is LevelCap signing off.